Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Savvy Dentist podcast, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Jesse Green here at the control panels as always, and today in episode number 119, I want to put the question to you: do you really own a business or do you have a job? And does it matter? Because one of the things that's happening a lot in the dental press at the moment is the conversation about creating a true business. And I'm a huge proponent of that. I think it's a really good conversation to be having. But typically, when we talk to lots of different practice owners, there's really four kinds of practices that come across our path. The first one is really a practice that is still in its infancy, it's barely viable, sometimes even unviable. And it's that startup practice where the dentist may be working there part-time and supplementing the income by working at another practice. And I'm not really talking about that kind of practice today. I want to be talking about a practice that's established, it's making money. And the biggest challenge that I hear all the time from practice owners in that particular space is, I might be making money, but I've got no time. I feel like I'm giving all my energy to the practice. I feel like the practice owns me rather than me owning it. And in essence, it feels a whole lot like a job. And the problem with that kind of business model is it's not really a business model. It's self-employment and it is creating a job. Now, for many dentists, that's perfectly okay. And many people who love doing dentistry and want to continue their clinical work, that's perfectly fine. And the situation for those types of practice owners is to really make sure you build a great support crew around you so that you can sit and do what you love to do, and that is the clinical work. So if you're a craftsman and you love the art and science and craft of doing clinical work, then that's a really good business model for you. But what I want to talk about today is true business ownership, because I think that there is some confusion but in the marketplace where practice owners who are craftsmen genuinely feel that they have a business. And as I've already mentioned, they have self-employment. And the fundamental difference between a self-employment situation and a true business is that as owner-operator or a self-employment situation is really in a situation where it's key person dependent, meaning that if that one person stops going into the practice, the whole show comes to a standstill. And the risk for that kind of business, as I've already elaborated, is that the owner becomes tired, burnt out, frustrated, and ultimately the practice doesn't quite fulfill its potential. And the misconception that they have a business is based upon the fact that they might have a corporate structure or whatnot, but it's really a job. So let's call it what it is. So I want to talk today about transitioning to true business ownership, and the fundamental difference between that and the operator style business is rather than being key person dependent, it is systems and team dependent. And the fundamental difference is that the owner becomes unshackled from the practice, meaning that if the owner is away for whatever reason, the business continues to tick over, and indeed it continues to thrive. And when the business owner returns, it's like they never left. The business continues to operate, I should say, very robustly. Things are happening smoothly, and ultimately everything's just as it was and as it should be. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how to go about changing gears, because the analogy I use is one of a car. And imagine you're driving from Sydney to Melbourne. You'd know what the destination is, and you put it into your GPS. But if you're trying to do that journey in second gear the whole way through, ultimately the engine burns out. Now, a friend of mine was telling me the story the other day about their car, and their son borrowed the car and took it for a bit of a spin and kind of thrashed it and blew a piston. And that piston went through the engine block and into the steering column, and ultimately that car needs a lot of work. And clearly, if you are the business owner, the practice owner, and you're in that self-employment situation, the last thing that we need is for a piston to blow, because that means that ultimately you as the business owner become hobbled. And so if you're driving from Sydney to Melbourne in second gear, ultimately you're going to hit an upper limit. You're going to hit a speed where the engine's burning, it's hitting the red light on the rev meter, and ultimately what happens in business, the analogy being that you hit a plateau. You're going as fast as you can, and because there's only so many hours in the day, you hit this plateau. And ultimately, for most people, that plateau is unsustainable, so they take their foot off the accelerator and continue to actually drive at a slightly lower speed. But the key to moving to true business ownership is the gear change, which many of you would have heard me speak about before. And the gear change really is a shift becoming from key person dependent to systems and team dependent. And what that looks like is the business owner changing their day-to-day focus. So rather being the guy or the girl who provides great care to patients day in, day out, all day, every day, they become the guy or the girl who is now able to build and lead a high-performance team, which is a very different skill set to dentistry. It's a completely different skill set that's actually not taught at all in dental school, and most people don't consciously learn it. They learn it by osmosis, they learn it on the job. But really, what I want to talk today is about putting some specific intent to making that gear change. And I want to go through 5 key points that will help you understand how to make that gear change and give you some practical tools to be able to do that well, safely, and as quickly as humanly possible. So there's 5 key things I'd like to share with you in this podcast to help you make a gear change in your business if that's what you'd like to do. So the first key point I want to talk about is that model beats mindset every single day. Now, I'm all for having a positive mindset, and that's great. I'm all for making sure that we're thinking positively, associating with good people in an upward spiral, and developing ourselves. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And in fact, it's a critical part of success. But, and here it is, the big but, is you can have the best mindset, be as enthusiastic as you like, but if you've got the wrong business model, you're enthusiastically climbing the wrong ladder up the wrong tree. And we need to make sure that we have the right ladder up the right tree and you actually spend your energy moving in the right direction. Now, how do I know this? I know this because in the past, I've created businesses where it was a self-employment situation, only to find that no matter how enthusiastic I was, no matter how much motivation I had, no matter how many people I was associating with that were really great, I still had the wrong business model. So I had to rejig the business model. So what I'm talking about in terms of the business model is making sure that you have a specific intent about what you're creating from the outset. If you want to create a true business, we need to be planning for that upfront and early as compared to just doing the default. So it's by design versus by default. It's a critically important thinking step up front and early, and understanding what it is that you're trying to create and building that in your mind's eye before you build it physically. So traditionally, dentists, as I've said earlier, they'll get into practice, they'll start doing dentistry, and they'll add an associate in and so on and so forth, but it becomes that self-employment. What I'm suggesting is taking some time out to carefully consider whether you want self-employment, whether you want a true business. And if it's a true business that you really want to create, it's about making sure you have the infrastructure, about making sure you have the resources, and making sure you have the requisite team to be able to take you there. And that is the fundamental thing. So it's all about who, not how. Same 3 letters, very different question, very different outcomes. So the key question to be asking yourself is, who do I need to help me achieve this? Not how do I go about doing this? So it's a fundamental thing. So remember, model beats mindset. Be enthusiastic, be revved up, be positive, and have the right business model. They need to go hand in hand. One without the other is going to lead to trouble. All right, so that's the first key. The second key, following on from that, is the skill set of being able to build and lead a high-performance team is fundamental. And at the very heart of this is understanding that the business growth never, ever, ever outstrips the growth of the business owner itself. So when you look at the rate limiting factor of growth of a business, it is always linked to the growth of the business owner. So invest in yourself, invest in your ability to learn how to lead, how to manage people, how to grow a team, and all of those things is a fundamental and important skill to be developing. So when you're building a team, again, the key word is specific intent. Who, not how. What sort of role do we need to fill, and who do we have to fill it? It needs to be done in a structured way, in a systematic way. So thinking about the organizational structure that you're trying to create as you build your new business model. How do you find great team? Having a system for recruiting people, understanding the ideal applicant avatar, making sure you know exactly the skill set, the mindset, the attributes of the person that you want to bring into your practice. Making sure that you craft an advertisement that speaks to that ideal applicant and resonates with them, and creating a magnetic job offer is fundamental to be able to attract the right people. Because one of the things that, I don't know if you guys have observed it in your practice, I'm sure you have, but certainly in our practice, is when we have a great person who comes in for an interview, I'm very acutely aware that those people have opportunities available to them beyond what we're offering them. So we need to have a way of pitching to them to make sure that they come and work for us, so that we find that great talent and we bring it into our business. So we also then need to be able to understand there's this great quote about hiring for attitude and training for skill. And my great beef, my frustration from time to time is that it's a great saying that's very rarely executed or implemented in the way that the saying would suggest. So we might hire for great attitude, but very rarely is there a structured onboarding and training process. So when it comes to building and leading a great team, setting people up for success from the very beginning is fundamental. So we need to have a structured training process for each of the roles that you might have in your practice. And there's about 5 or 6 key roles. So you might think about a dental assistant, you might think about a receptionist, a practice manager perhaps, a dental hygienist or therapist, and a dentist, whether they're an experienced dentist or a new grad dentist. So there's those 5 or 6 fundamental roles that occur time and again in a practice. So making sure that you know what kind of person you want to attract for each of those roles, making sure that you have a compelling advertisement that's going to resonate with those people, having a structured interview process, a specific intentionality of creating a magnetic job offer, and then onboarding and training well so that you set people up for success in your practice. Now, of course, once they're in your practice, it's about making sure that we recognize and appreciate people, and we retain people, and we continue to invest in people. Possibly the best example I've ever seen of someone who does this really well is Richard Branson. I had the good fortune to spend some time with him last year at Necker Island, and his team are so incredibly devoted to him, not because of the celebrity of who Richard Branson is, but because he genuinely cares, genuinely invests, and genuinely leads those people in the quest to create Virgin as the best business on the planet, and he genuinely engages his team and staff in that quest. And so my question for all the business owners is, what is the vision for your practice, and how are you enrolling your team into that, as well as providing the training and the interviews, skills, and so on to be able to get those people in the first place? So that's important, critical indeed, to be able to build and lead a high-performance team. So the third thing I want to focus on is really the word focus, and understanding that as a business owner, you have 24 hours in a day and 2 hands. 24 hours in a day is possibly the only thing in life that is equal no matter your circumstances. And yet we find that some people are able to use that time really, really well, and other people are not able to get a lot done. And the only thing, as I said, that's equal in life, everything else is different. Economic circumstances, opportunities, nothing else is equal other than time. So utilizing that time productively and effectively is of fundamental importance. So it comes back to doing the right things in your business. and understanding what tasks are taking up your time. So one of the things that we talk about with our clients is mapping out the tasks that you do. And tasks will typically fall under one of three categories. They'll either be admin or clerical type of tasks, they'll be clinical dentistry type of tasks, or they'll be typically tasks that might be referred to as on the business or strategic thinking kind of tasks related to your business development. And what I've observed over time is that many dentists, rather than asking the who question, keep asking the how question, and their time is sucked up doing low-end tasks. So if you were to think about this in a really methodical and structured way, you would map out all of your tasks, categorize them into those three categories, and figure out where you're spending your time. Now, understanding that, of course, an admin or a clerical task can be outsourced for about $30 an hour. Your clinical work can be quite profitable for you, but if you're looking to create a true business, then there needs to be the ability to dial that back somewhat. So this is when you change gears. You take your foot off the accelerator, you engage the clutch, and you change gears. And it's about finding those people who are able to deliver great care to patients on your behalf. So again, understanding that where you focus your time and energy is of critical importance. Most people are spending all their time doing admin tasks or clinical dentistry and trying to fit the strategic thinking on the business activities in and around. And really the strategic thinking and on the business activities are the big rocks, and they're the important things that need to go into the diary first, and most people don't prioritize those. So a simple calculation that you might want to be thinking about is your effective hourly rate. And your effective hourly rate is a metric that was introduced to me by a mentor of mine, and really it looks at the amount of profit that you make per month. And I talk about free cash flow, and the amount of free cash flow you generate per month, and the number of hours you work doing admin duties, clinical dentistry, and on the business. And that really comes back to your effective hourly rate. And the way to increase your effective hourly rate is to ensure that you are using your time for its highest and best use. And that really is strategic thinking on the business kind of activities. So coming back to the gear change, most people, when they try to change gears, where people come unstuck is taking the foot off the accelerator, meaning giving up a little bit of clinical time in order to grow the business, and seeing the revs come down a little bit, and not understanding that as you change gears, you re-accelerate and ultimately go faster than you were in that previous gear. It's a bit like in baseball. If you're on first base and you're trying to sneak across to second base, you can't go from first base to second base by keeping your foot on first base and stretching out for second base. It just doesn't work. So when most people encounter the gear change, they run back to what is familiar and what is known, and that is doing clinical dentistry. Again, nothing wrong with that if you want to have a complete self-employment situation, but there needs to be some transition out of so much clinical dentistry if you want to build a true business. So the fourth thing I want to share with you is the concept of critical thinking. This is probably a very useful tool that I've encountered over the last 2 years, and it's fundamentally changed the way I do business. If there's one thing I've learned in the last 2 years that has had an incredible impact on my own business, it's the ability to put time aside for critical thinking. And of course, this comes back to on the business activities. But I want to talk about this specifically because it is something that's been incredibly important to us. And for me, I think it's the number one business advantage that you can engage as a business owner. And remembering that business is an intellectual sport. Business requires thinking. It requires an analysis, critical thinking, rather than intuition and gut feel. And one of the things I want to share about that is we've found it very, very useful to put an hour a week aside to really sit down and ponder some questions. So I want to give you some guidelines around this. The first thing is that many of us spend a lot of time reading, which is fine. I'm going to suggest a little less reading and a bit more thinking. And as you go about your thinking, I'll challenge you to ask yourself the unasked question. And it's important then, as you ponder your question, which you might write a list of suitable questions and then tweak those questions. And you might be asking yourself, what are the symptoms and what are the causes, and how do we solve the real problem? What am I thinking about? Am I getting stuck in the story, or am I looking upstream to where the problem is? Is that what's really happening there? We need to be sure that we are solving the correct issue. It's also, as you go through the process of critical thinking, to review your assumptions. Very, very important, because we all have assumptions. We all have filters from which we view the world. And the ability to think critically means we need to be aware of those assumptions, those filters with which we view the world. So one of the key questions that I ask myself regularly is, what don't I see? What are the things I'm missing? What are the things that could blindside me? What are the things that could knock me off my perch? And how do I then go about that risk mitigation scenario? So the fifth key thing I want to share with you is that running a business, unlike clinical dentistry, is a lot less precise. Clinical dentistry is very precise. We have our margins, we have our endodontic processes, which require a high degree of perfectionism. And that's great in that context. Perfectionism, when it comes to running a business, can slow us down, however, because running a business is somewhat messy. It's a bit like raising a family or raising kids sometimes. There's got to be room for a little bit of play, a little bit of chaos, someone falling down and skinning their knee. All of those things mean it's a much messier environment. And that's okay, because prolific beats perfect in the business context. So for those of us who are natural born perfectionists, like most dentists tend to be, we need to be okay with letting go of perfectionism in business. And it can be perfectly imperfect, meaning that my life from one day to the next may not be as neat and as orderly as I'd like it to be in that context, in that business sense, and that's okay. It's an evolution, not a revolution. We're getting better day by day by day. And the key thing to understand is the only person that we're competing with really is the person that we were yesterday. If today I can be a better person than I was yesterday, then that's fantastic. And in so doing, being okay with the fact that we're going to make mistakes, we're going to have stumbles, and that need for perfectionism, if we can let that go and embrace the fact that we're going to have a few stumbles and mistakes, then that's okay, because ultimately it's going to speed up your process and progress as you make your way from self-employment to true business ownership. So there's 5 key points there that I want to share with you for anyone who's thinking, I really want to take that gear shift. I really want to go from second to third gear. I want to move from owner-operator, where I run the risk of being the key person and getting tired and burnt out, to moving to true business ownership situation where it's systems and team development. There's 5 key things to consider as you make that journey. 5 key milestones, 5 key thinking points. And I'd really encourage you to take heed of all of those, because in every journey that we've helped people on, these 5 key things have been the things that have separated the people who have successfully made the gear change to those that stall midway and retreat back to what they know best. So I hope you've enjoyed this particular episode. I hope you've got some notes. I just wanted to share with you that over the next few weeks, we are going to be shifting our podcasting hosting platform to a new platform. So for those of you who have subscribed, we will need you to resubscribe at some point, and we'll keep you abreast of that. But as always, if you want to find out more about what we do, please come and find us at the Savvy Dentist Facebook group. Head across to drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And in that group, you'll find tips, training, tools, techniques to help you make the gear change that you want to make to true business ownership. And I hope you all have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the flip side. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.